Hey horror fans, welcome back to another episode of Terror Talk where I discuss creepy clips online. The original horror music that you hear in these videos is composed by me. I am also a huge horror movie fan, so if you'd like my top 5 horror movie recommendations and frequent horror movie reviews sent straight to your email, check the pinned comment below after watching. I also have another free gift that will inspire that creepy side of your imagination. Now let's get into it and have some fun.
This is a disturbing memory from my young childhood. I was about 7 or 8 years old. My mom would usually take my brother and I trick-or-treating, but this particular year, after school, she dropped me off at my friend Sean's house, where Sean, our friend Johnny, and I would go together. Johnny and Sean were a year older than me. We met while I was playing with my brother on the block. Johnny and Sean lived around the block from me. Sean had a weird upbringing that I never really understood. His sister was like 20 years old. There was a big gap between them. She was always his caretaker, it seemed, whenever I was at his house. His house always smelled like cat, and his sister always had a different guy over, it seemed like.
Have you ever had a weird upbringing? Let me know in the comments below. For me specifically, my upbringing was pretty normal, I guess. But let me know. I love hearing weird stories about different people and different things. So let me know in the comments if you had a weird upbringing.
His sister was always cold to me, in the sense that she'd never acknowledge me or say hi or anything. Sean's dad was never in the picture, and his mom, I believe, was always working out of town, I guess. I only met Sean's mom a few times. We never really stayed in touch for long enough for me to figure all this out. Anyway, my mom dropped me off at Sean's, expecting that Sean's mom would be trick-or-treating with us. After saying goodbye, I went into his house. Johnny was already there. We all had big pillow sacks to fill with candy. This was around the time that I learned that neither Sean's mom nor sister were coming with us to supervise. I was young, so I sort of felt slightly uncomfortable knowing that Johnny and Sean would be leading the way. But at the same time, I felt a sense of excitement that we'd have more freedom.
I feel like being 7 or 8 years old that you should have accompaniment, right? Is that a little weird to you that this kid didn't have accompaniment at 7 or 8 years old when trick-or-treating? Because that is pretty young, and a lot can go wrong at that age. So I feel like that's very irresponsible, but that's just my opinion.
I knew for a fact my mom would not have approved of us going unsupervised, though. So, eventually, we were off into the neighborhood, walking around doing our rounds door to door. Quite a few people asked if we were alone or where our parents were, and Johnny would always be the one to use the same lie, that his mom is up ahead with his sister. It worked every time. This was on a Friday, so we didn't get to start at trick-or-treating until around 5 o'clock. But we didn't have school the next day, so we intended on going until our pillow sacks were completely full. We took a break after a couple of hours and went to Sean's, where he heated up a bunch of frozen pizzas. At the time, I was so jealous of the apparent freedom he had in his house.
That honestly sounds like such a good time, huh? Just like trick-or-treating until your sack is full. And frozen pizza, like that sounds like a genuinely good time. Although I'm not one for trick-or-treating, I've never been, but all that candy, just the thought of candy alone, I love candy. Let me know if you love candy and sugar in the comments because, oh, I could just eat candy and sugar like all day, even though that I don't. That's not good for you, but let me know if you love sugar as much as I do.
Not having parents who cared about what he did. But looking back now, I count myself super blessed to have grown up in a household with 2 strict parents. After we hung out at his house for an hour and watched Halloween specials on Nickelodeon while eating pizza and candies, Johnny eventually was picked up by his mom. But Sean and I wanted to keep going, so we eventually headed back out for round 2. It was dark out now, and it had to be past 8 p.m. There were a lot less trick-or-treaters now. We tried to go to certain blocks we hadn't gone down yet, which meant straying further away from Sean's house. We found a block we hadn't touched yet and continued knocking on doors. Some houses didn't answer at this hour, and mostly everyone else had a comment about us being alone or how it's getting late. We noticed a man pushing a stroller a couple houses down behind us. He was walking very slowly in our direction. Probably a dad trick-or-treating for his young child. As we continued going door to door, the man with the stroller got closer. Eventually, we heard him going shh and singing softly. Eventually, he caught up to us, and he said, "How's the trick-or-treating going, boys?" And we replied, "Good," at the same time. And then he said, "It's pretty late. I'm on my way back to my house. I can give you guys the rest of my candy." Sean and I looked at each other with telling faces, as if we just hit the jackpot.
Yeah, already this is starting to sound pretty weird. And there are sickos like this in the world who will try to lure young kids in like that. But, I don't know, at that age, you don't really think anything of it, but this is pretty strange.
Sean asked what kind of candies, and he said a bunch of bags of different things. He said he didn't get to give much away because he wanted to take his daughter out for a trick-or-treat stroll. He did have a bag dangling on one of the handles of the stroller, which was filled with some candies. The stroller was fully covered by a folding piece on the top, so we couldn't see his daughter. He said she's asleep and he didn't want to wake her up, but he pointed ahead and said his house is just up this way.
That's another red flag right there. How much you want to bet that a fake-ass baby is in that stroller? This guy is creepy.
So we followed behind him as he pushed the stroller. He was walking a little faster now. As we walked, I realized there was next to no one else out at this point, even though it was a Friday night. It seemed like a quieter side of the neighborhood. The man talked to us as we walked, asking us questions. What part of the neighborhood we were from, where we went to school, basic stuff. I let Sean answer most of the questions. Him being even just a year older than me at that age, I felt like he was the one who should take lead. On multiple occasions as we walked, the man would lean into the stroller and talk in a high pitch to his daughter. Then he'd turn back and smile at us. We finally made it to his house. He led us up the walkway with the stroller and unlocked his door. After he opened it, he brought the stroller with his daughter inside first, and then invited us to come inside. Sean led the way, so I followed. I was the one to ask if we could leave the door open, and the man paused and then said, "Yeah, of course." He said he'll be right back as he goes to get the candy bags. He pushed the stroller into the middle of the living room, only about 10 feet away from where we were standing. I nudged Sean because I felt uncomfortable. I whispered, "Why would he leave the candy so far away?" Sean didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the living room and then walked up to the stroller. He lifted up the folding part that was covering the baby, and he looked disturbed. He hurried back to me, whispering, "Let's go." He was full on running once we got outside, and I followed behind, which was a bit tougher because we had those heavy pillow sacks. I still was confused about what he saw, but just then, we heard a woman's voice yell, "Excuse me." It was one of his neighbors. She came running over to us and asked if we know that man, and it was at this point that Sean spilled the beans and said he offered us his leftover candy, but he was pushing a stroller with a fake baby in it. I remember getting goosebumps as he said that. The woman said, "Yeah, that man doesn't have a child. I saw you walking by with him." She took us to her car and drove each of us home. I know, getting into a stranger's car after that was another questionable move. The woman came to my front door to talk to my mom about what we just told her. My mom was distraught. After I told her every last detail about the night, she sent me to my room while my parents called the police on that man. My parents never told me anything about what happened after that. I believe they wanted to shelter me from any more exposure to the situation. My mom didn't want me going over to Sean's house anymore, and I know she had quite a bit to say to Sean's mom. I did see Sean at school once in a while still, and we remained cordial, but our friendship was never the same after that night.
Yeah, I called it with a fake baby, didn't I? I mean, that's pretty sick, honestly. Come on. But I also find it kind of sad that their friendship was affected like that. Because they were clearly good friends, and it's not Sean's fault that his family is really weird and unconventional. And that was pretty irresponsible of the mom letting them go off alone, but you know, to not let the kid go over there again, I feel like that's pretty strict. And that's just me. But, you know, maybe how about, you know, just don't go trick-or-treating don't go over there to trick-or-treat again. But I can kind of see where the main kid's mom is coming from, not wanting to let him go over there again. But it's just still kind of sad to me that, you know, their whole friendship was affected because of just one incident. Just because of one sicko. And it shouldn't have to be that way, but sadly sometimes it is. But those are my thoughts. And I thought this was definitely a creepy story. And I don't know, there are a lot of sickos out there, so don't let your kids go trick-or-treating alone. That's really, really not a smart idea. But I thought this was a creepy story, and I hope you enjoyed my commentary and the music. And if you want my top 5 horror movie recommendations, check the pinned comment. And I will see you in the next video.